Welcome to the March 4th Village Board Legislative Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, Republic, God.
Trustee Lopez,
Present.
Trustee Levin,
Present.
Trustee Quesada,
Present.
Mayor Garrity.
Present.
Mayor's and trustees announcements.
Yes, I believe we do.
I'm
wanna kick
looking
us
for
off?
mine.
Sure, I will kick us off. My mic is hot. I'm good. All right, good evening, everyone. Good to see you. I have, sorry, just give me a second here. I have a pop quiz for you. Pop quiz time. So, how, now my answers are not here, but how, there are 3 ways to respond to the census. What are the 3 ways to respond to the census? Anyone?
Oh.
Jamie, what's one?
Online.
Online is 1.
By telephone.
By telephone is 2. Corporation Council, what's number 3? By mail is number 3, correct. By April 1st, everyone in the community will receive information on the census and on responding to the census. So there are 3 ways, as our folks here have said, on how to do that. And so the soonest you do it, the better. It is an incredibly important part of getting resources to our community, ensuring that we have an accurate count, make sure that we have also, we're going to have our congressional district redrawn and making sure that we're as well represented in Congress as possible is really important. And just making sure that we know who is here in a way that is anonymous, that is not going to impact or be impacted by your current status in terms of immigration, but also in terms of being able to provide the services that the community needs. So Census 2020 is on the way. Be on the lookout. Thank you.
Thank
There
you.
go. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Levin.
So, I just wanted to read something out because sometimes if I don't have it in writing, I don't do it well. So my other job, my full-time job, is working at a community center that is located on the border of New Rochelle and Scarsdale. Many people know that in the community, and so it's been a very interesting time with the coronavirus hitting that community most recently, but it is really all over the world as a pandemic. And I just sort of wanted to make a statement for the public piece of this that I wrote down as I sat through a number of webinars in the past few days and meetings, which is that as we're reminded, and we will be, I think, today as well, by the village manager and others, of practices to keep healthy. Statistics are being poured in minute by minute on the internet, and authorities are instructing us, as I'm happy to report they're instructing us, to stay calm. Many people in our community are carrying a heavy burden, are very anxious for their children, their aging parents, themselves, as the coronavirus moves closer and closer to home. And the current reality that we all face is that things are going to change due to to this kind of pandemic. What I sort of thought about as I sat through that I just want to remind everyone is that oftentimes these sort of viruses that pass through communities really, in addition to the anxiety of trying to stay healthy and doing everything we can, and as we get information from the Center for Disease Control, the New York State Department of Health, and all the other websites are available, I just think that we also have to realize that we are about to go through, and from everything I read, a culture of social distancing. We live in a culture of a lot of hugging. Handshakes are very common in Western civilization, and our children are from a generation where hugging is very common practice. But we need to start respecting each other's space. People who have been asked to self-quarantine should do that. People who have traveled around the country and really at this point all over the world should be aware of it. But the other thing that we need to be very self-aware of is how we distance ourselves from different cultures, especially in a very diverse community where different groups have sort of been highlighted as having and being carriers of these diseases and the virus, and it's beginning to, I think, take a different sort of turn than I think that Ossining should be taking. We live in a highly diverse community. If you've traveled, we have a lot of people that travel all over the world. You could stay at home. If you feel sick or your children are sick, then please do as the authorities have asked, which is self-quarantine yourself and stay at home for a few days. If you see that your children or your parents, because this has actually hit men over 60 more than almost any other group, stay home and let it pass. Some people are carriers and some people have it. But more than anything, I'd like us to be a community that actually understands that our cultural differences should not be shied away from. Certain businesses that aren't being transacted in anymore because of certain ethnic groups that are running them. I really hope that this actually brings us closer together and that it brings out the best in our community, and that we actually figure out a solution to this sooner rather than later. And from everything I've read, the best way to not get this is to wash your hands, literally every minute of the day. And that's probably the best way not to pass diseases. So I just wanted to remind everybody that we are a community that actually cares about each other. And I think we're going to probably get a remedy for this sooner rather than later. So I thank everybody for letting me sort of just reflect for a minute, not usually my mode of operation, but it's just something I've been working through for the past few days. So thanks for the time.
Speaker Sada? Okay, well, there is an awful lot going on. I guess I'll pick up where Trustee Levin left off with talking about the coronavirus, and I know that Manager DeTore may have some comments on that. There was a message that went out from the village earlier today, so if you are signed up to receive emails from the village, you would have received that. We started off our day, I think it was about 17 of us from village and town government who met we meet somewhat actually monthly for in the Office of Emergency Management, which is all first responders, several department heads, management, elected officials, this meeting was a little bit different. There's obviously a lot of information about the coronavirus. The number one thing of which is this is no cause for panic. Instead, it is a cause to wash your hands more and be conscious of your interactions with folks and all of the important things that Trustee Levin was referencing, but I just want to reassure folks that we are taking it very seriously in Ossining, as we do with everything to do with your health and safety. Our staff have been in contact regularly with the County Department of Health, which is reiterating the important messages and information from the CDC. In fact, Assistant Village Manager Zahach is right now at Phelps with representatives from the police department as well as from town government, connecting with other community organizations that could be helpful in sharing information during this time of heightened awareness. There are a lot of community partners. We're very fortunate to have so many engaged organizations in our community that can help with communication and preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, which is a good general policy for these kind of concerns. And it was also an opportunity to confirm among all of our department heads, because village government provides so many resources for our day-to-day lives, that there is the importance of having a continuity of operations, and having those plans in place is something that I found reassuring to so many of our department heads today. Also, I think, Karen, you can have an update on water, because we've had some really exciting news about water. Okay, good. Then I won't steal your thunder on that one. And there are a lot of great things happening in our community. Several of us were just at the Broadway Bridge, where we were celebrating the official opening of it, although we've been fortunate to be able to drive over it for a while. Today was a celebration of that major infrastructure project. And for me, it was kind of bittersweet. It's probably the last ribbon cutting for a big infrastructure project that will happen during my tenure as mayor. And my first one was at almost that exact same location, just a few months into my tenure as mayor, when we did the Sing Sing Kill Greenway, which of course is right beneath the Broadway Bridge. So it was a really lovely ceremony. Thank you to everyone who made that project possible, made the day such a nice event, and to the community members who joined us for the occasion. We had some historical insights shared with us by Dana White, our village historian, Gareth Huffam from Hudson Valley Arts and Science, who has done just an incredible amount of ecological research and study of the Sing Sing Kill was there. And we also had a special presentation from a community member who lives nearby and is a woodworker. And he created a wooden bowl for the village out of one of the trees that had been that had fallen in the kill and was being taken out of the area for the project would be undertaken. You're chatting while I'm talking. It's in the car, the bowl. Oh yes, thank you, Chief, for keeping it under lock and key and protecting it. We'll be displaying that someplace where everyone will be able to appreciate it sometime soon. He also made a very special plate for special one just for Paul Fraioli, who because when he made the bowl, he wanted to give it to Paul. He said, no, it's for the village, and so made an extra one just for Paul because Paul was such a key person in making this happen. So it was lovely. Thank you to Mr. Schneider for that. And I'm glad you mentioned the census. I believe next week they're going out in the mail.
Correct.
And all of those ways that you can respond and give your answers to those 9 questions for every member of your household, if you do that in any of the 3 ways that Trustee Lopez recommended, then no one will visit your home. So if you don't want to have strangers knocking on your door trying to count the people in your house, take care of it by phone, online, or by mail sometime before the end of the spring. And this has been a really great week for Mother Nature. If you have been shopping anywhere in the state of New York in the last few days, you have been reminded to get your reusable bags. You no longer are going to have single-use plastic bags available. So we probably all have a bunch of them in our house. And if you have not been diligent at always remembering to bring it, well, New York State's making sure that you become a little more diligent. So that is going in the right direction. I hope that means that we'll have fewer of them trapped up in our trees for the next generations to come, or in our water systems, which is often where they end up. The town's food scraps composting program is well underway now. There's a little heightened awareness of that in the last week. And I got my tubs. I'm now filling my 2nd tub of compostable food scraps in my home. And when I have the big tub filled up, I will put that in the back of my car, drive to Sealand Park, dump it in one of the compost bins, and then it will go back to the earth and get out of our waste stream, which means lower tipping fees for the Village of Ossining, which is good for all of us, just from a practical financial reason, even if you could care less about Mother Nature. And the last thing that I'll mention on the sustainability front was, well, there's 2 things actually. One more is municipal solar has been something that we have sort of been banging our heads against the wall for years, trying to get solar installations on municipal property. Ossining does a great job at helping people to have a streamlined approach to having to having solar installations on their personal homes. In fact, some of us here have them. And we have a streamlined approval process in our building department. We're generally an environmentally conscious community. We also did the Solarize program, so we're way ahead of the game in that front. But now, for the first time, we think we figured out how to make it financially viable for a municipal government to have solar. And that is thanks to a partnership between Westchester County, Sustainable Westchester, and NYPA. And so we are just need to put together a list of all of the village-owned properties. They'll come back, tell us what the analysis says of what's possible and what the financials would be. There's no upfront costs, so it seems like it could be a win-win for everyone, which is incredibly important right now, not just for us as taxpayers in the community or people who care about renewable energy philosophically, but New York State has set some very high standards for us to reach by 2030. The expectation or the goal set by Albany is that 70% of our electricity will be from renewable energy sources. Right now, it's under 25%. So we've got a lot of work to do in the next 10 years. Hopefully, this will be getting us further along that path. The last thing I will mention is putting on my documentary discussion series hat. Please join us on March 19th at 6:30 p.m. for a documentary called Knock Down the House. It is about 4 women who ran for office in 2018. The one of them who did win her seat is pretty famous. It's AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is one of the 4 candidates that was followed around by this documentary crew. Of course, at the time they didn't know if any of them would win. The other four from different parts of the country. One's in West Virginia, dealing with issues to do with the coal industry. One of them's out in Nevada, and I'm forgetting where the fourth one is. But it's a really exciting, compelling documentary film. Please join us at 6:30 on March 19th. And of course, as always, there will be an engaging conversation with our panelists following the screening. Madam Clerk.
Wait, Madam Mayor.
Oh,
wait.
yes, sir. What's up?
I have one more census-related announcement. Get ready. So I know you said that if you fill out your census, no one will come to your house. But, and that is true. But if someone does have to come to your house because you didn't fill out the census, I'm presenting the opportunity for you to be that person. There are jobs available to be a census taker. Now get this. Pay starts at $23 an hour. Mileage is reimbursed. You make your own hours between 10 and 40 a week. This is an unbelievable opportunity. So the website is 2020census.gov. Tell them Trustee Lopez sent you. They'll take care of you.
I will just add to that my personal experience. Census 2000, I was a census enumerator. That was my part-time job. I made nothing close to $23 an hour 20 years ago.
Well,
So
there
yeah,
you go.
it was an
Times
interesting
have
it was an
changed.
interesting job.
Thank you.
Moving on to administrative reports, Village Manager Karen DeTore.
Sorry about that. We, as the mayor noted, we did start this morning, meeting, with town and village officials to talk about, COVID-19, our response, and also, the ability we have to communicate actual information about, what's going on. And while it is a very disturbing time, and there's a lot of, information out there. I do just want to reiterate that it is unlikely that you will get the disease. If widespread cases were to occur in our area, most people are likely to experience mild to moderate symptoms with full recovery. And I just want to reiterate some of the most important things which went out in our message today. The CDC recommends the following. Wash your hands, often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. If you go on to, if you go to YouTube, you can find all sorts of songs that are 20 seconds long that you can sing while you're washing your hands to make sure that you wash them the appropriate time. If you don't have soap, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer made with at least 60% alcohol. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, mouth with unwashed hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Stay home if you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze with a tissue, then throw the tissue in the trash, and clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces. Following these rules actually make a huge difference, and we will continue to keep you informed. We're working closely with the county, with our healthcare partners, to make sure that we have access to good information. If you want to, there's a few hotline numbers that are listed on our website and in the message. You can always call the manager's office for more information, and you can call your doctor too if you're sick. If you don't want to know what to do, it's better to do that than show up at a hospital or a doctor's office. So we will continue to provide updates on that and make sure that have all your services running efficiently during this time of services. Our newly operational powder activated carbon system is working well at reducing MIB in our water system. And if you remember, MIB is the particulate that's causing unpleasant taste and odors. So we're testing the system running 100% from the Croton Reservoir right now, and test results demonstrate consistent improvement at removing MIB from our water along with the associated unpleasant taste and odor. So step one is really ensuring that we have the PAC system optimized to maintain water quality if we are solely reliant on the Croton Reservoir. Once we are sure that we have the right optimization of the system, we will start adding water from the Indian Brook Reservoir in conjunction with the Croton Reservoir, and we will see even greater improvement, we anticipate. So, again, if you do notice anything, please feel free to call. But right now, I just poured myself some and it's tasting pretty good. So that's good news. Last Friday, several of us from elected and staff positions in the village, town, and the town of Newcastle and the village of Briarcliff attended a community resilience workshop. And this is put on from a group of regional partners such as the Nature Conservancy, the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, Scenic Hudson, New York State DEC Hudson River Estuary Program, and others. And what they're doing is assessing existing and future risks in the waterfront and tributary communities to the Hudson River Estuary. So they're using a community resilience building framework. And what that means is that they're getting, again, municipal leaders together to identify projected climate change impacts in the community through existing and new science-based modern models and tools, identify each community's infrastructure, social and environmental assets that are strengths and weaknesses related to resiliency and vulnerability, and develop collective strategies and actions to help eliminate, reduce, and mitigate identified future impacts and prioritize those strategies. So this was a really great event that gave us the ability to work with our neighboring communities to look at what our risks are, what our strengths are, and how we can really develop plans working collectively and regionally to address those. So it was a really good experience. We learned a lot, and we also realized that we have some good plans in place, and this really helped to optimize them. On Monday, February 24th, we hosted a walkthrough of the kiosk at Henry Gordine Park, which several potential vendors attended, and they got a tour of the space. All sealed RFP responses are due at the office of the village, the town clerk's office, this coming Monday, March 3rd by 10 a.m. And we're very excited to see the responses we get, and we are hopeful that whomever is chosen, oh, I'm sorry, did I say? March 9th, I'm sorry, at 10 a.m. So we are excited to see what responses we get, and we're hopeful that whomever is chosen will have the space up and running for the summer. Also on Monday was, the 24th was a busy day. Our recreation superintendent, Bill Garrison, and Amy Hoffman and assistant village manager, Zahat, and I were joined by Trustee Levin, Austin Police Department, Village DPW, Corporation Council, hear from local business, event organizers, and community members about our proposed changes to the village special events policy. We shared our information on how we foresee the processes and fees changing in 2020, and also received some great feedback on what we could be doing better for our neighbors. And Jamie Hoffman has been working on this closely with Superintendent Garrison to gather best practices. Coupled with this community-specific feedback, we are working to finalize our recommendations and plan to share the results at the work session on March 25th. We are also getting ready to embark on work with the vendor for our new accounting systems, Edmunds. Phase 1 will begin this week as scheduled. Village Treasurer and Deputy Village Treasurer will be spending several hours engaging with the team from Edmunds this Friday to get the ball rolling. And we are still on track to go live with accounts payable, purchasing, HR, employee and vendor self-service on July 1st, 2020. And also, as part of our automation, you can now submit FOIL, Freedom of Information Law requests electronically through our new FOIL tracker system from the convenience of your home or office computer. You can access FOIL tracker on our website, and it's under departments, under clerk. And this provides not only a convenience for people requesting information, but it allows the clerk's office to track FOIL requests more easily, as well as our Madam Clerk can attest. So we are excited about those new innovations. We're getting fully online in 2020, and our building inspector will provide some additional information on that report on new automation in.
Before we go on, I just wanted to add to what Manager Dottori was talking about with the last week's Community Resilience Building Workshop, which was really a valuable day. And thank you to everyone who helped organize it and make it happen, and to the several staff members who were part of it. It was also attended by representatives from, obviously, town government, the town of Newcastle, also the village of Briarcliff Manor. So it was good to learn from our neighbors and identify what are sort of the areas where we may be susceptible to some of the challenges that will be coming with climate change, and where we have some really great resources to draw on if that should happen as things are changing. So I just want people to understand some of the big things that we hope to get out of it, that we think that this kind of collaboration can help lead to. And in fact, we are the last set of communities on the Hudson River to participate in these resiliency workshops. And the reason why they held off on coming to Ossining is because we were going through the Cornell Climate Adaptive Design Studio experience. And some of the feedback that we got from one of the organizers from the Nature Conservancy was that we had such a strong ability to be able to put things into context and identify what we're experiencing on our waterfront and in our community. And I think part of that is because we've been having these in-depth conversations talking about the impacts that we anticipate from climate change from our waterfront, particularly. And this is all happening at a really valuable time for us as we're updating our comprehensive plan. So that was one very tangible outcome that I think we'll get from some of these valuable resources we were exposed to last week. But then also, anytime that we participate in programs like this, it opens up the door for more grant opportunities, which can help us pay for some of these, extra challenges that come with climate change, particularly as we do smart decision making for development, particularly in the areas of all along the waterfront that will be most impacted by climate change. And then the big thing that we're kind of pushing for, and we've been talking about it since Cornell was here, because the greatest challenge that we may have in the next 30 to 50 years is in how is Metro North going to handle the Hudson Line train, because when my children and grandchildren are living in Ossining and wanting to go down into New York City, the tracks will be under the water much of the time, and then all of the time if some big changes are not being made. And we did involve Metro North in a couple of our meetings with Cornell when they were here, and they kind of got it, but I was actually a little discouraged that they didn't fully understand what they need to be shooting for. And so I talked with one of the organizers from one of these organizations, and what we think may be an effective path forward is for a coalition of riverfront communities from Yonkers to Albany to be sort of our own lobbying organization with Metro North, that they need to have a realistic plan for how they're going to probably either raise the tracks 30 feet in the air or encase them in a tunnel. Otherwise, we're going to lose our rail connectivity to New York City, not too distant future. And it's a huge undertaking that they need to start planning for now if they want anything by 2050 or 2080 when it's going to be necessary. So it was a valuable day on a very important path. So thank you. Madam Clerk.
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan.
I thought I waited till she was done.
I'm finished.
Thank you, Martha. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. This week, the Historic Preservation Commission had its meeting on Monday evening. I had previously mentioned to the board that there was some discussion at those meetings with regard to the possibility of presenting an application for landmark status for the warden's residence at the Hudson Point condominium, which is now the clubhouse there. Members, owners from Hudson Point attended an information session in January as well as the HPC's February meeting. And at this meeting on Monday night, the HPC decided to table their consideration of any application for the warden's house being made as for landmark status. But the HPC is looking at some other things, one of which is a high school essay contest, which they are going to be communicating with Superintendent Sanchez to have an essay contest dealing with historic structures within Ossining, and that would include basically the Ossining School District as well. So it's possible that will happen this academic year, probably more likely next academic year, but you will certainly be hearing more about that. Also at the meeting, Member Dana White indicated that there are some additional locations in the village that are interested in having museum in the street signs put up. So that is something that the HPC will also be looking at as it goes on. On Tuesday, next Tuesday night, there will be a meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. It is a full agenda, and if anyone wants to see the agenda and the documents associated with it, they can go to the village's website, and everything will be there. On Thursday, March the 14th, there will be a joint meeting of the Town and Village Environmental Advisory Committees, and that will be held at the Community Center to discuss issues of interest and issues of common interest between those two committees. Thank you.
Police Chief Kevin Sylvester.
Good evening. Lots going on with the police department. As is typical of this time of year, we're doing a lot of training. Last week, we completed department-wide training for legal updates, sexual harassment, and a very timely topic of bloodborne pathogens and personal protective equipment. So I'm glad to have had that pre-scheduled on the calendar there. Next week, we go into defensive tactics training. So a little bit of hands-on stuff going on then, and then immediately after that, once the weather warms up, we'll run into our first half firearms qualification. Quite a few officers involved in individual training right now. We've got 2 in instructor development, which is a pre-requirement in order to be able to teach any class in New York State as a police officer. So those 2 officers will then be able to step in as either field training officers or topical instructors for different things in-house. Additionally, our 2 officers that graduated the police academy in December should be wrapping up field training over the next couple of weeks if they pass. So we'll be evaluating them closely over the next couple of weeks. And some good news in terms of additional training to be able to add. We met with Alice Jostle this week, and we've been offered to send 3 officers. Communities of Care is going to pay for 3 officers to attend TIPS training, which is training for intervention procedures, and they very liberally use those letters to form an acronym. What that is it's some training that our officers, this is a train the trainer seminar, where our officers will then be able to provide training to retail and on-premise, those establishments with retail and on-premise liquor licenses in order to help them to prevent the sale of alcohol to underage people and to help prevent drunk driving. On that note, our 2020 Vision Project is continuing on. Tonight, when you left the ribbon cutting, you may have come out and seen our officers doing the Block the Box detail at the top of Church Street. We did not project that one as we sometimes do, mostly because we were sort of balancing that against the crowd coming and going from the bridge project. But attacking that problem on Church Street, we've also had some conversations with DOT this month to try and see if they can help us with that problem as traffic continues to get backed up. This past weekend, we did a DWI detail, a DWI enforcement detail that netted 2 arrests, and we have more of those scheduled in coming. We'll likely announce those. We're not trying to get arrests. We'd prefer if we didn't have to make them, if everybody just voluntarily complied and didn't drive drunk. Next week, we'll be taking delivery of our new body-worn cameras from Axon. This is not a new program for us. It is an expansion of what we're already doing. Every one of our patrol officers has been wearing a camera for 7 years now or so. What this is, as we had mentioned in budget last year, is this is an expansion where we're actually going to issue an individual camera to each officer so that there is no sharing of equipment, which will make it more efficient. It'll have more officers with cameras on, to include detectives, lieutenants. I'll have one myself. So every single person when they go on the road will have a camera. And that I can say has paid dividends for us tenfold in terms of not only training benefit, but being able to see what goes on calls and show the good work that our officers are in fact doing. Last, I just want to mention something that we had put out on social media earlier this week. Last week, the district attorney's office announced a guilty plea in the stabbing case from James Street from 1 year ago. That person, Andrew Knight, had pled guilty to manslaughter in lieu of going to trial over a murder 2 charge. He will be sentenced in June. We're grateful for the good work of our detectives. Nonetheless, it leaves our community and a family broken. So we take no celebration in that. That's all for tonight. Thanks.
From the building department, Joe Agostinelli.
Welcome, Joe.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, members of the board. I'm here tonight just to give everyone a little update on what we've been doing in the building department over the last couple of months. If you're not aware of our new program, Simprosity, which is a software program that we're going to have available to the public shortly, is a program where homeowners, plumbers, electricians, architects are allowed to submit applications to the building and planning department by doing it online. They can submit all the plans, everything digitally, instead of having to do all this paperwork and coming into the office, which saves a lot of time for applicants to do it at the convenience of their own home or office. So some of the things to bring you up to speed on Simprosity is most of the data that had to be transferred over is almost complete. We set up some dates. Forms that I gave you earlier are just some, I didn't want to go through all the numbers and bore everyone, so I just kind of gave you some sheets, but to touch on them a little bit, with the program, we have some training that's going to be coming up for the staff the next 2 weeks, starting this Friday to next Friday, so they can get acclimated with the system and be able to help the public when they're in need to learn how to use it themselves. On March 20th and 27th, which are 2 Fridays, we're going to be inviting as many we have in a list of local architects and engineers that can come in and also get a little bit of training so they can get acclimated with the program. And the idea is to have this program ready for use for the public on April the 1st, which is what we originally were aiming for when we introduced the program. We're still on target for that. We're going to also put on our website, try to put information out to let people be aware ahead of time that we're going to be turning over into this program. If they're not fully aware how to use it, we have a kiosk that's set up front of the building department when you come in, and it's for the public to use if they want to first time user to get acclimated with it, and we'll have staff to be able to help them out to do so. So hopefully we're excited about having this in because we think it's going to be something that's going to be very useful to the public and much more convenient, especially in today where everybody could do everything online. Second thing that I wanted to talk about, I broke up the presentation a little bit into building and code enforcement. So in building, what I want to give you is a little idea of what you saw, like some of the things that we do in completing FOILs, inspections, permits, certificate of occupancies, some reviews of plans, giving out some certificates, how we did last year and what we're up to this year. So we're pretty much almost on target, only 2 months into the year that we're going to be doing pretty much the same. Looks like it's going to be the same numbers. One of the good things is with the clerk now having a way to do the FOILs, submitting online, and the fact that we're going to be on Simprosity is going to make it a lot easier because one, people could do it online, and two, it may cut down the amount they're doing because on Simprosity they can actually go in and print the signed certificates that they need, like for architects and for realtors that want to get for the homeowners through transactions. They can get the actual signed certificates without having to request through the staff and the staff having to print them out and getting them over to them. They can do it right from their computer. So we're excited about that as well to make that easier for the public. And other things that we also did in the building department, just to give you up to date, one of the bigger projects that we have going on with the Austin Children's Center is moving along very well. They're anticipating to be open by early summer. That's actually a really good thing. One of the good things with that is we finally got 34 State Street to get the demolition done to take the building down. We wanted to have that accomplished prior to the opening of the Children's Center because we do not want to have all that demolition going on while they're going to be opening in the summer. So that actually is a good thing. Moving into like code enforcement stuff, we've actually enforced more now doing fire inspections than we've done in the past. So like last year we have here 326 fire inspections that were done, concentrated on the first portion of that in the downtown area. We did mostly Main Street, Spring Street, State Street, up to Broad Avenue. Did Central and Randwick with the idea of trying to focus on those areas because at that time we were doing the Neat Streets program. So it gave us an opportunity to take the brochures that they had made and give them out to the residents and the owners in that area so they can, since it was a new program, we wanted to concentrate on those areas first. So we handed these things out to business owners, property owners, and tenants in those buildings along in the downtown area. Our next step we were doing was we're moving up in the commercial portion of it. We're going to be doing this year mostly up Croton Avenue. We had anticipated that we have about 1,100 or so properties that fall into the categories of these. So since we were able to do roughly a little over 300, we're supposed to be doing these inspections every 3 years. So we're trying to keep in line where if we get these certain areas done, by the time we get them all accomplished, we should be back to starting where we originally began from. In some of the cases on these fire inspections, it's a little difficult on the apartment complexes to really understand like how many apartments are really in there because of the way the records were in the past. But some instances we did have some issues with some where, where we've seen some apartments that were not up to standard and they had to resubmit applications to sometimes what was 8 apartments down to 4 because of the way the setup was. We did definitely make all these buildings much more safe from what they are. So if they were lacking in fire safety and if they were missing certain items that were required to be done by state code, they now actually have them because they were not inspected for many years. So we're at least accomplishing in that sense more safe housing. Some of the other things that we were working on. Avenue. Okay, 1100. So we also have been using when Tyler Assessment came in 2016, we started looking through the list and realizing that there was a lot of discrepancies where a lot of property classes were changed. And they couldn't determine whether or not they would change how they gained the information. And we started sending out notices, especially on 1-family, 2-family homes, and started sending notices out requesting that if we could come in to check to see how the buildings were being used. A lot of people responded to them. We were able to get in. Certain cases, class was just corrected because it was incorrectly taxed. And in other cases, there were some issues that we dealt with and violations were given out. It actually has been very useful with that, even though they did have a lot of different changes, but it at least gave us a little opportunity to try to rectify the situation of what was going on in the house. Also, we actually were taking inventories, what we see there, and on those inventories, we're setting them up to put them into our new system. So once we've actually gone out there and inspected them and realized what the inventory of the rooms are, how many apartments, how many, if they're 2 bedrooms, how many kitchens, we're able to put that into our system. So now we have a reference point to begin with. So there should be an issue with that going forward. We actually have a base record that we never had in the past. So we've created that record. I didn't give you on the list here a lot of stuff about violations, only because violations that are issued are various different types. We have violations of sanitation, we have violations of property maintenance, we have violations for overcrowding. They're in various different stages. Some of them, people were issued OTRs and they're pending correction. Some are in court appearance tickets. So it would be kind of a little bit difficult to really just give you provide out numbers where everything is in their stages. But if you see the number of complaints that we respond to, we're up to about 150 already in the first 2 months. So, you know, every complaint that we do get, we do go out and investigate every one of them to check to see what the situation is. We don't miss any of the complaints that come in. And if violations are observed, we start the process of.
Sure, people have questions and comments. Thank you so much, Joe, for that in-depth report. We haven't gotten to see you in this forum for a while, and there's a lot of new information that I think we're all sort of catching up on. So who wants to kick off the question and answer period here?
I'll start. Hi, Joe. Thanks
Hi,
for
Howard.
coming. So I'm new, and so I have the opportunity to speak for all of the folks at home that are also new to this conversation. And so I would like to hear from you a little bit of history about code enforcement and what, from your perspective, the issues have been in terms of code enforcement.
Issues and actually what we actually get in complaints for types of.
Great clarification. What are from not from the complaint side of it, but from the process side?
When you're going out there, what are you seeing? What are the violations that you're seeing?
You know, we have numerous violations. Some people put in complaints and we observe for property maintenance, just the conditions of the homes. Tenants call and complain about certain conditions in their home. It could be leaks. It can be damage, certain damage, certain fire safety. Sometimes there are people putting complaints about overcrowding. In 1 and 2 family homes, we can't, by state law, we can't just perform fire inspections. They're only allowed 3 family and up. So in 1 and 2 family, we can get into complaint. We can go to front door, request that we come in if we have a complaint. Sometimes they let us in, sometimes they don't. Times when we get the complaint from a tenant, the tenant is filing the complaint, so they 99% of the time will let us in because they're the ones filing the complaint. So, but we're allowed access into their apartment, not necessarily the entire building. We can observe different violations that are on the exterior of a building if we can see it from the street. But one of the difficulties is when you're getting complaints on the 1 or 2 family homes and it's interior in the house, because we have to actually get consent to get in. If we don't get the consent, we can't. We have to observe the violation to actually make a case. So that's some of the difficulties when people put in complaints for those particular homes.
Thank you. And do you notice any kind of, I'm trying to ask this question in a way that addresses one of the things you said in the beginning, which is that you don't have kind of comprehensive data showing these are the kinds of complaints that we're getting. 32% are this, most of them are, you know, that, which is really what my question is. So I'm trying to ask it in a more roundabout way. Do you notice any kinds of larger patterns in terms of the kinds of complaints that you're getting? And I'm particularly focused on trying to address what the most chronic issues are. What are you noticing?
I mean, we get complaints fairly a lot across the board. We get a lot of complaints about, we do get a lot of complaints about overcrowding issues. We get a lot of complaints from people just about the maintenance of buildings, of their apartment. We get complaints from the Department of Public Works about sanitation issues, so we issue sanitation tickets for those things. But I would say it's not really just one type of complaint. We get various different types.
And for overcrowding, what do you do about that?
If we can observe it, then we would write them up. They get a violation, which gives them, it's called an order to remedy. They get a violation for 30 days to correct the violations. If it's, say, an apartment that was created in an attic or a basement that's not supposed to be there, we put up a notice on the door of that apartment saying that it's not habitable. And then it's up to the landlord to work on getting these people of a location that they can't stay there unless they have a way to legalize it. And in some cases, It's a difficulty because if the zoning district says a 2-family and they've created a 3-family, they can always apply for a use variance with the zoning board, but that's not always easy to get. And the process to do it going through the zoning board takes some time. So, in the meantime, it's up to the owner to make sure they make provisions to have the tenants removed. And we won't take people and just throw them out on the street. They have obviously opportunity to another place they can rent that is legal. But we put up the notice to let them know that we've observed it. This is what we're telling you. They can't occupy it, and they get written their violations after 30 days. If they don't comply and they don't move in a positive fashion to try to rectify it, they get a court appearance ticket.
Thank you. Pass the mic.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Haven't seen you in a while, so got a bunch of questions now.
Sure.
Some of them are just clarification. So you're spot on. You're trending. So the numbers for 2020 is January and February, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the numbers are spot on. You're almost running exactly the same from year to year, except it looks like permits issued for some reason was like 83 per month last year, and so far it's 68 per month. But and the C of O's actually, I think, are lower in 2020. I don't know if it matters. I'm sure no big story there. It's interesting. Just look at the numbers. The staff is about the same, right?
Yes, we have the same staff this year as we did last year.
Same number.
Yeah, and we're actually right now working on getting a second assistant building inspector that I'm working with personnel on, because we have a lot of commercial projects that are getting approved through planning and zoning. And when you're doing larger commercial projects, apartment complexes and so forth, they request inspections on a daily basis because of the amount that they have to do and they have to move along. So if we have multiple projects of that size going on at the same time, we want to accommodate them and do those inspections so they can move diligently. But we also have residentials that people, decks, additions, so forth. So rather than having to tell people, we're booked up for another week, which stalls the progress of the project, we want to get ahead of the game and get an additional person that we can make available so we can continue to accommodate them and keep going forward. So we are anticipating hopefully in the next couple of months, to have a second person who's out on the field doing inspections to accommodate the public. Because you see the number of inspections we did, like last year, we did 2,800. And we're trending pretty much in the same way without even those projects yet beginning. So I anticipate by next year that they're going to be even more than what you're seeing here.
Right, you're talking about the fire inspections.
Yeah, the actual building inspections, where it says on the building inspections completed.
Okay. So, yeah, you're actually exactly the same. You're saying there's an uptick. You actually did 234 per month in 2019, or 234 per month in 2020, but you're saying your prediction is that you're going to have more.
Right, because we have a number of projects that are commercial projects that are on the horizon. And once they get approved, a lot of them are going to, once they get their permits, they're going to be starting work on these. And every commercial project that's going on, they literally request inspections daily. So to accommodate that, say you have 2 or 3 of them, along with other inspections for residentials, there's only, by the time an inspector goes out and does, say, 6 or 8 or 10 a day, then he has to come back and record them. And some people fail and they have to come back again for another inspection. And to keep the project going, they usually want the re-inspection that following day. So to accommodate the projects to continue moving, it's much, and then obviously you have staff that do get vacation, there's holidays. So to accommodate all of this, we figured a second inspector would be very helpful. And actually, assistant building inspector also is allowed to do code enforcement. So if they're not doing specific inspection or reviewing plans, they can also help and assist in doing fire inspections and code questions, code problems.
The fire inspections. So you said something, and I just don't know if I wrote it correctly, that estimate total is 1,100 properties.
Right.
So at 320 something, you'll get 3 years. What does that include in that 1,100? Like, so is it an apartment building with 100 units,
Yeah.
one unit? Or,
Yes.
or 100
It
units?
could be apartments like on Main Street where we have a business on the first floor and maybe 6 or 8 apartments above. And in some cases, we have buildings along South Highland where there are 3 buildings of 60 apartments each, and we have to do them all. So
Well, I get that.
we would,
And is that?
How are
that
you counting that?
That's one?
that's one.
Sounded really low to me when you said that, so I said, that I
But
did
each
not.
one could be like 90 units.
Yeah, they vary in different size, like we've done
Right.
inspections to Snowden
Yeah,
houses.
just
and
trying
it
to
takes the
That's
whole-
actually makes more sense now. I got a little bit confused there. You also talked about how you made buildings safer. So what did you mean by that? If you could just
So
explain
if
that.
they don't have the proper exit signs, emergency lighting, if if their building is equipped with a sprinkler system and they haven't had it tested and it's not operational, at the time, God forbid, if they needed to have that working, it wasn't inspected, it may not be, and I'll find out about that until there is a fire. So we're making sure that those things are inspected, that they're operational, they hire proper people to do those inspections, same thing with fire alarm systems. And they actually, elevators, if they haven't had them inspected, they hire a qualified elevator inspector to perform the inspection, make sure they're up to standard, and if they're not, then they have to make those corrections to make them pass. But that's part of the stuff that we do is the fire inspection to collect that. So knowing that the elevator has been inspected recently, that maybe wasn't done years in the past, knowing that the sprinkler system is operational and working has made them much safer because it may not have been before.
So just so I get sort of a big picture without fail an inspection, somebody has to come back, do it
Right.
again.
Yep.
So that's like 2 inspections for that building, unit, whatever, right?
Right. But we
Always
don't,
have to do that.
but I'm not I'm giving you numbers of the number of actual buildings. Not if not that they've done inspections 4 times and that counts as one.
Right, so I'm just saying you're actually doing more than what this
Yes.
represents,
Correct.
because what percentage fail, for example, like 20%, would you say?
50%.
50%, so really I have to take this number, so half the inspections you did failed on the first one. You have
Right.
to send somebody back.
Right.
Not reflected in this really, because you're under
Right.
spends. And then hopefully you don't have to go back a third time.
Sometimes
Right.
we do.
Sometimes. but
Because they
there's
call us, we give them like if they fail, we failed them, we give them about 2 or 3 weeks to start correcting it. And then in 2 or 3 weeks, we'll go back and maybe they've corrected 5 of the 10. We'll record that they did the 5 and then say, we'll give you a second opportunity. Maybe they had a schedule to get somebody to come in to do the fire alarm test and the person wasn't available, but they're coming in the next day or 2. So we give them the extended time to get it right. If we've done 3 inspections and they still haven't got it right, they start the process of giving them violations.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. It has actually been since 2017. You haven't been one of us
17?
like this.
Isn't that long?
Mark your calendar.
I
Yes,
did.
Counting the days.
I did. So it's been a while, on this forum at least. But no, thank you. So I know talked about a lot of violations, about compliances. I want to talk about a little bit more of streamlining process that we've been working on it. Mentioned about the building department, homeowners, applicants going to online, but it's not just that. Sure, actually applicants that go to the planning board, zoning board as well.
Right.
Going to be saving on paperwork. Applicants are going to be saving on paperwork. Staff is going to be saving on paperwork and a lot of the stuff because everything's going to be digital. Even for UN, my understanding is the review process of the applications are going to be pretty much on an online basis.
Right.
So a lot of the revisions are going to be going directly to either to the homeowner or to the architect or to the developer in regards to that. So I think that part is going to be benefit to us and a benefit to the public whoever is doing the application. So there's a lot of positive things in that part. I think, you know, point some of the numbers, you'll be able, even for complaint, going to be a phase portion. Not,
Right.
we have one right now, but this is going to be a little bit different, but the same.
I believe they can actually file their complaint right right into the system, and
Right.
we can see it in the morning, or we can have access to it through, connected through my email, and we can get the complaint that the person can actually file it right on the system.
And they can track, well,
They can
I'm not sure
track
about
everything.
the tracking part, but I know the building department portion of the application portion, they'll be able to track it. If you
Yes.
have a plumbing permit, they'll be able to track, you know, how
Right,
long does it take.
so whoever is associated with the permit, the homeowner, the architect, the contractors can track the progress of that project. Wouldn't be just everybody and anybody because it's
Sure.
somebody specific's project, but
You have to
whoever's
create-
associated can follow that. The person who puts in a complaint can actually, if they're listed as a person who actually have the complaint, they can go in and follow the process of that as well.
I mean, there's a login to in other municipalities, and I believe that's what we talked about here is creating a login user
Yes,
name and a password when you do an application,
Right.
so they'll be able to track. all
they
that
can
stuff.
track it, yes. So they can see the stage of it, that it's been received, it's in the review process. If there's revisions, I can send the revisions directly right to the design professional, and the homeowner can see what those revisions are. They can see when the architect responds to that, so they can get those in, and when the permit's issued, they can see the process of how many inspections have been completed, what's passed, what's failed. They can follow the process of the entire project to the end.
That's very helpful for the public and for even us to understand that and see what has been going on, is what is going to happen next few months to come. One thing that I do want to ask you, and forgive me for this, in the sheet that you provided to us, you have business occupancy certifications or certificate, the C of Os
Yes.
for the business part. So in 2019, you have 20.
Those
How many
are
businesses
people who've come in that open new businesses here. What happens is, we've given out information to the public that if you open up a new business, you have to come into the office so you can get a business occupancy certificate from us. And what we do is, we go out there and essentially do another fire inspection, make sure before they're going to open up that the space they're going to be in has all the fire safety. We also, if any of the business that they're going to be providing to the public requires them to have certain licenses and registrations, we collect that. So that if they're opening a business to do a hair salon, sure that the people who are actually in there actually have the proper licenses to perform the service. We collect all of that. It's only 2 in the beginning of the year because I guess only 2 people who've come in recently to businesses. But I mean, it can be 2 right now, and then all of a sudden 1 month we have 6 or 7. So by the end of the year, that may change and become another 20 or 30 again. And actually, that you brought that up. That the clerk has talked about trying to get a registry of all the businesses in Ossining. So some of them that we were able to help her out with was give her these business occupancies, so that obviously if we gave out those certificates, those are businesses that are here that she can put in her registry. And others that she started doing was when they do the refreshment cabaret, coin operated. Those are obviously businesses. And I spoke to Sue Donnelly recently about how we're going to go about creating that actual group that she can register what businesses are actually in Austin, because for a long time we didn't have that registry. And that's actually going to make more inspections, because some people who are actually required to apply for applications to get refreshments licenses through the clerk haven't applied in the past. Well, we'll have a list now and know who needs to get those.
The other thing that you mentioned was you guys are thinking of hiring an assistant building inspector on this.
Right.
One of the things that I have requested and I have had conversations with the manager was something that we had in the past, someone that actually works on the weekend. Not Sundays, but Saturday. Some of the stuff that we talked about, it could be benefit to have an assistant building inspector Saturday level. A lot of the stuff that able to streamline again the process as well. So I want the rest of the board members to understand some of the process that we had been part of, maybe for some of the internal conversations and some of the meetings that we had internally with I was part of the staff meeting. Well, so there's a lot of things that are happening, try to enforce our zoning, our regulations, and help of that we've seen that is been happening, now being happening.
So, as for getting another assistant building inspector, if we are talked about having, interviewing people and not making them understand that the position may be something where we're going to do, say, Tuesday to Saturday, having an assistant building inspector on Saturday, would allow us to also give the opportunity to homeowners and larger commercial projects to schedule inspections on Saturday. Some homeowners, I mean, they're working Monday to Friday, they can't schedule an inspection, but they would have the opportunity on Saturday. And this individual will be able to perform that inspection. And like I said earlier, the assistant building inspectors are also allowed to code enforcement. So if on a Saturday there were issues or code that they need to do, they can also do that on Saturday as well. Sometimes we can't gain access to buildings Monday to Friday, but Saturday we may be able to do that. So that there would be a benefit to that if we're allowed to have person Tuesday to Saturday.
Keep in mind again, used to have.
We had a code enforcement officer who worked Tuesday to Saturday, yes. We actually at one time had a code enforcement officer who worked Wednesdays until 8 o'clock at night. And they came in at 1 and left at 8, but it was only on Wednesdays. And that was just to give them the opportunity that if you couldn't access, to follow up on a complaint because people weren't home until after 5 o'clock, we could do it on Wednesday, 6, 7, 8 o'clock.
Last question I have, and I want to ask.
Just you made. I'm hearing it could be a maybe. Are you saying it will be, or are you saying it may be? I mean, I'm
We
sort of
are-
like not hearing.
We are canvassing
Okay.
for Tuesday through Saturday.
Okay.
So yes, will be.
It will be.
That's what we're looking for. When we canvass, we have to make sure all the applicants, somebody's okay with Tuesday to Saturday.
We are
Have to
That
looking.
should be
canvass
the
it now.
requirement, because I think that's
Yeah, that
what we've
is-
been asking
that's
for
what-
a
That's
few.
how we're canvassing for.
So the inspections complete. That is between residential, commercial.
Yes.
What out of the? I'm not going to hold you to the numbers. What's the percentage on the residential?
Right now, predominantly they're residential. That's what we have the most of. In the commercial that's going on now, maybe some alterations in some commercial buildings. Ossining Children's Center needs inspections on a daily basis because when they were doing all their foundations and footings, they're doing sections of pours at a time, so they schedule every day. But if we have, anticipated, I know we have a couple of commercial projects that actually, I think there's a couple that are ready, just about to submit their permits to us that are not the biggest, largest projects, but they are commercial projects that are going to probably take a lot more attention.
Thank you.
So that will grow. A lot of commercials are going to go up.
So Joe, wow, you've been here a long time tonight. That's what happens, I guess, when you wait 2.5 years to come
2.5
back.
years.
Well, I'm more
We've
questions,
been
but-
saving up so many questions and comments, and I want to start off by saying that I think you're doing a great job, and I say that after getting a lot more update on so many of the things that have been going on, because so much of what you and your department does is behind the scenes, and there are some, high profile frustrations that people have in the community, and what we're not seeing is so much of what we've been able to learn from your progress that you've been reporting to us tonight. And what I'm really happy about is some of the proactive inspections that are going on, things that we've talked about for so many years, and I know your department has geared up to do, and then sometimes it doesn't come to fruition for a variety of reasons, usually not related at all to the buildings themselves, but to other things that are going on in village government. So really happy to hear about the progress being made with the fire inspections. I'm glad to see you're now on this, hopefully a 3-year cycle, so that you're going to really get into every one of these buildings that's subject to fire inspection. I just want to clarify one thing on that front. When you're going in there and you're looking at the fire exits and you're looking at the sprinkler systems, while you're there, if you observe other building code violations, I assume you also issue those violations while you have the ability to observe them.
Yes, we
And-
actually, on all the buildings, we tell them that they need to, we give them a notice ahead of time and have them organize it with the tenants, make them be understanding that on this particular day, we're going to come out to do the inspection, so they have to allow access to their apartments. So we give the management company adequate time to let the tenants know that. So we don't just do the common hallways, we go to every apartment.
Oh, so if you go to a building and it's got 80 units in it, you
We
show
go
up
all.
on that day and you go into all 80 of the units. And while you're there, you may observe violations related to fire codes, but you may also observe violations related to other building codes, and they will be held responsible for those as well.
That's correct.
Thank you. And on the other front is it's really nice to hear, because we've been hearing for years, ever since the town 2 years ago started with the revaluation with all the properties, and we had all the information from Tyler with the new assessment, and when there were discrepancies between that and the building department records. I'm so pleased to hear that that data is being used for you to follow up and figure out how to rectify it, whether somebody's being overtaxed or somebody is in conflict, is in violation with how their property is being used, whatever, it's getting into compliance, and you're finding those and you're addressing them. That's really, really great news.
Right, and we actually, like I said, we're taking an inventory of the house. So we fill out an inventory sheet, so we know the apartments and what size the apartment's supposed to be. If it's a 2-bedroom, we mark it down as 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, kitchen, living room. And then all of this information is going to be uploaded into the new system. So if we get a complaint from somebody next year, after we've been there the year before, we don't have to go back and look through the records again. We were there last year, we made a record of it. That's the record now. We've created a base.
Excellent, excellent. Having accurate records in the building department is something that sometimes has been a struggle because your predecessors maybe didn't do as good a job as you are now. So thank you for putting us on the right path. And the next generation will have you to thank and your team to thank for getting us in a better place in that
Maybe.
front. No, not maybe. Yeah, you're doing it. So, and then of course you mentioned, those are some of the proactive things that you're doing, and you're scheduling and you're working through those lists. But then you're always having to respond. So you're also reacting to complaints that are made, whether it's property maintenance or you
We
respond to
get
all of
complaints right now in different ways. People just call and leave messages. Sometimes people send us emails right on our email server, and we just respond to it. And the complaint could come in. They do not have to leave their name. They can be anonymous. But every complaint that we get in, we make sure we enter it and we follow up on checking in some cases, the complaint has no basis, but we always put in the result to it. So there is always a follow-up.
Thank you. I could say more, but you've been standing there a long time. So the last thing I'm going to ask is where you started when you're talking about the Simprosity program, which I think is going to really, really help streamline things and be such a welcome change for everyone who interfaces with the building department, as well as for our staff, as soon as everybody figures out how to use it. So with that, you mentioned—
There'll be some time to get used to it, but
Sure.
eventually we'll get there.
Sure. You mentioned training dates for architects and engineers. I assume that could also be for contractors that have to make electrical So is there, you mentioned the dates are Friday, March 20th and March 27th. And you've reached out, I guess, to people that you have easy, contact information
We're
for?
going to, tomorrow we're going to send out, now that we established the dates, and it's going to be in the morning. They're going to do like 10 to 12 o'clock. It's going to be at the operations center, where they have the zoning and planning board meetings. And there's going to be representatives from the company Simprosity there to actually walking through it as a group of whoever shows up on either one of those 2 dates. We have in our and our data, are obviously all the contacts to the architects. So we're sending out an email to all of them to let them know about these dates that they can. The contract is a little difficult. We can send it out to the ones we have in our database as well. But there's a lot, and when we're looking at design professionals, usually there's a group of maybe 20 to 30 who do a lot of work in Ossining, so that would be beneficial to them. Contractors, we have between electricians, plumbers, general contractors, there's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But when they do submit, or they come in, like I said, we have a kiosk in the front, so we can kind of teach them how to do it. We'll have the staff to do it, and maybe the person who's the electrician that has 10 permits to submit, to know that he can do this at home, or secretary can do this, is going to be much easier, because they have to take the time out during the day when they should be
Yeah.
at their job sites to come in and wow.
Oh, definitely. What I was wondering is when you're holding these trainings on March 20th and March 27th at the Op Center, in addition to the engineers and the architects, if we were able to get the information out to the community, because Ossining has so many contractors, as you mentioned, general contractors and electricians and plumbers, would it be beneficial for you and the building department and your staff if as many as possible came on those dates?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Right.
we're going to try to get out as much information as we can the next couple of days to
Okay.
reach out to as many people as possible.
If there's some sort of like simple flyer or notice that we can push out in social media or and maybe that would be a way to just reach out to, ordinary people who interface with the building department in this way.
Yeah, we
Great.
have the list of people we can
Yeah, I
reach
know.
out to and do
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I know some of those people too, because it's all the same names that come through all of
Yeah.
our land use boards and such.
But I mean,
some of the smaller people that we don't,
right. The biggest thing is what, obviously all the contractors, they're welcome to come. When we're talking about like submitting planning and
Okay.
zoning applications, obviously they're always done by architects.
that's a little higher level
And they
stuff.
come
Yeah.
in with a package with 12 copies for every member, so the packages are huge. But knowing now that they can just submit everything online and have all the plans just submitted digitally, and when the planning department is giving out copies to the members on that board, they can just send it to them. And actually at the meetings, they do get one digital copy to the planning department that goes up on the large board there. So most of the members are using that anyway rather than the paper. So you
Right.
imagine how much paper is being printed out. Doesn't need to be, saving a lot of that.
Okay, thanks. This is all great news. Any final questions or wishes for our friend Joe Agostinelli here? Joe, Joe, I remember when we met. It was very soon after I became a village trustee, and your boss at the time, because you were an assistant building inspector at the time. I don't know. I was going around from department to department to try and learn what everybody does, and he said, "Oh, probably wanted to get me out of his office. Said, why don't you go on a call with Joe and went and we did you did a refreshment license, and while we were there, I know there were a couple of other
I do
things.
remember that. Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, I do remember.
We
We had to
went-
try to get it in because I think you had to pick up your kids from school. or something.
Probably, yeah. They were little then. Yeah, then they had to be met at the bus stop. Yeah, very good. There was something with the fire hood, I think, and there was something with the exit, and as always, you were very respectful to the property owner, and that is the kind of feedback that I hear from people who interact with you. So thank you so much for taking the job so seriously.
That's good to hear.
And
Thank you.
I appreciate seeing you, move up the ranks in the department, and it's a pleasure to get so many of these good updates tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Almost
got more?
escaped.
I'm not dismissed yet?
And one of the benefits.
Mhm. Yes.
Sorry, one of the benefits that having Joe is he actually speaks Spanish as well for a
Yes.
lot of this stuff. So you help translate a
Yes,
lot of the things
right.
that happen.
We
both
have a
with the
lot of
building
people,
department.
tenants that want to file complaints, and they call up and they need somebody to speak to and explain it in Spanish, and I always make myself available to them.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Is there anyone here who would like to make an organizational announcement? Okay. Moving on to village board resolutions. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board on any of the resolutions this evening? Okay, then moving on to the resolutions. Approval of minutes, February 19th, 2020. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin hereby approves the minutes of the February 19th, 2020 regular meeting as presented. Do I have a motion? Um, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, approval of voucher detail March 4th, 2020. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin hereby approves the voucher detail report dated March 4th, 2020 in the amount of $743,660.83. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Um,
No.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Appointment of Peter Madison and Claude Tusk to the Village of Austin Board of Ethics. Resolved that Peter Madison and Claude Tusk are appointed to the Village of Austin Board of Ethics each for a 3-year term expiring on December 31st, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Station? Comments?
Yep.
Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Authorizing settlement of Norrin Farrell versus Village of Austin ETAL. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the Corporation Council and the Village's outside defense counsel, the Board of Trustees approves the settlement of the case Norman Farrell versus Village of Austin, etc., commenced in Supreme Court, Westchester County, under index number 705/2017 for $70,000, and it is further resolved that upon review of the Corporation Council of the general release and stipulation of discontinuance of prejudice, the village treasurer is authorized to issue a check in the amount of $70,000 payable to Norman Farrell and Richard L. Giampa, PC, in full satisfaction of the settlement for this action. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Second.
Corporation Council, is there any need for on this? Okay. Madam Clerk?
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Authorization to sign proposal with Transition Designs and Architecture PLLC. Resolved that upon review by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign the proposal for alterations and roof replacement at John Paul Rodriguez Austin Operations Center with Transitions Design and Architecture PLLC, 29 Marble Avenue, Pleasantville, New York, 10570 for the amount of $208,194. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution adopting administrative procedures and technical standards for the Village of Austin's cross-connection control program. Whereas Section 259-19 of the Village of Austin Code Cross-Connection Control Program purpose states, the purpose of this article is to protect the department's public water supply from contamination or pollution by isolating with the consumer's internal distribution system such contaminants or pollutants which would backflow or backslip into the public water system. The Village of Austin's cross-connection control program will be accomplished by plumbing control and containment by having the consumer install an acceptable backflow prevention device in every water service line to a facility for which a potential hazard exists, and whereas pursuant to Section 259-22A of the Village of Austin Code Administrative Procedures and Technical Standards, administrative procedures and technical standards shall be adopted by the Village Board of Trustees pursuant to resolution after public hearing. The superintendent will operate a cross-connection control program, including the keeping of necessary records to fulfill the requirements of this article, and whereas the public hearing was closed on February 19th, 2020, and now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to Section 259-22A of the Village of Austin Code, the Village of Austin Board of Trustees adopts the following administrative procedures and technical standards for the Village of Austin's cross-connection control program, which administrative procedures and technical standards are currently followed by the village's water/sewer department and building department. Resolved that the above referenced administrative procedures and technical standards shall be effective immediately and shall have retroactive effect as to all pending applications, inspections, and testing of backflow prevention devices, and be it further resolved that the superintendent of the water department should periodically advise the Board of Trustees whether the above referenced administrative procedures and technical standards require change. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board?
I just have a question, and this is more, like, I just have to know. These sections are all sequential. It goes from 259-19 to 259-21 and then 22. What's in 259-20? Oh, but there is one, right? There is they're all sequential for, I'm just curious. It's, okay.
All those in
sorry.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh, I'm sorry, aye.
Okay. Authorization to sign an agreement with New York Leak Detection Incorporated. Resolved that upon review of the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign the February 21st, 2020 proposal from New York Leak Detection Incorporated, P.O. Box 269, Jamesville, New York 13078 for leak detection survey of the village's approximately 84 miles of water distribution system. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board?
I do have one quick thing, but it's not related to this. It's actually under definitions.
Oh,
It's, in 259.20.
is that right? Oh, all right, thanks.
Sorry. Thank you.
It's a learning process
That
here.
was a quick
It's
look
part
up
of the
there. Yeah,
job.
good job. But related to the leak detection,
No questions.
this is a great program. I'm glad that we're expanding our ability to detect leaks in the water system. It's an incredibly precious resource, and every time we're able to detect leaks and tighten up the system, we're making our system more efficient and keeping the costs as affordable as possible. Madam Clerk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Moving on to continuing business of the board. We have topic A, municipal law tax change.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Hello.
Hello.
This is, we had a discussion on this. This is with regard to the municipal lots. Earlier this week, I had sent to you folks a revision to proposed local law 1, which did two things based upon our earlier discussions. One, it changed the time for overnight parking on lot 1, which is the municipal building, for 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And it also changed the definition of commercial vehicles, which there were some issues raised at the time of our last discussion on that. The commercial vehicle definition now does include vehicles that might have commercial advertisements on it, as well as any vehicle which is considered a commercial vehicle for purposes of registration requirements of the state of New York. And those were the two changes here. I know, Mayor, you and I had a conversation about this earlier this week with regard to the two lots that we had dealt with, I think, which were in the vicinity of Market Square, as to whether they should be part of the overnight parking. And there was some question as with regard to snow removal from municipal lot 1. So I'm obviously open to any comments or questions that the board may have, but those are the changes on the proposal here. Again, with regard to the time for parking in lot 1 and the definition of commercial vehicles, which is different and more expansive, frankly, than the definition that we had which currently exists in the code.
Does anybody else want to go first? Okay, so yeah, well, I'll start with what I think is the easier one with the downtown lot. So one of the things we talked about was the municipal lot, and instead of making that 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., if we made it 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., that would mean that when the town and village boards or there's other committees and groups that sometimes meet in that building after hours, that we'd all show up by 7:30, get our parking spots, and then if the overnight parking people showed up sometime after 8, then whatever spots were available would be available to them, and the nights that were not there, then it would not so relevant. So that makes sense. The point that I brought up to Stuart about the downtown lots, the post office lot and the Market Square lot that currently do not allow overnight parking, it occurred to me that one of the reasons that may be the case is because we have a lot of restaurants and businesses downtown that probably want their customers to be able to park in those lots. We're in Westchester, not New York City. Most people do go out to dinner by 8 p.m. So perhaps it makes sense to make those lots 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. as well. I'm speculating, but if I own a restaurant on Main Street, I want my customers to be able to park, and I'd be willing to bet that on Friday night, a lot of the people who are parked in the post office lot are walking across the street and having some, delicious Turkish food. Or Portuguese or or Portuguese, or yeah, I'm not trying to leave anybody out. I was using one example. I haven't spoken to the restaurants. I'm just guessing that that might be why. That's a different part of town where we do have hopefully people going and frequenting our businesses.
Is that the kind of question that would be addressed as part of the larger parking study? And if so, would the result of that study impact the decision that we're making here?
Do you
Hey,
wanna,
Maddie, you have some thoughts on this?
I have some
Welcome.
thoughts. Yes, good evening. So to answer that question, I think all of this is sort of malleable, and I think this is going to be an evolving process to see what works. I think, and Corporation Council had mentioned to me the conversation that you had. I thought that perhaps it would be a great way for us to check this out, to apply the same rule, if you will, to municipal lots 5 and 6, which again are the post office lot and the Market Square lot, as we're trying for lot number 1, which is the municipal lot. So basically putting in a rule saying we're going to allow overnight in these 3 lots where it had previously been prohibited, but the rules are going to be slightly different, and then just sort of see how it goes. I do believe also, and the chief can correct me, there are still other parking spots in lots 5 and 6 that would be 3-hour spots. So, I mean, to answer the concern potentially about the restaurants, there still would be parking available in that lot that would not be subject to the municipal lot tag. It's sort of a combination in both of those, I believe.
And I think to Assistant Village Manager Sahaj's point is this is something that's malleable, and then as we go forward with this comprehensive plan and this parking study and getting more feedback from what's working, we can actually use that as, you know, so we have the opportunity to try some different things here and see what works and
Then my other comment is, I think we just the concerns that we raised with the commercial vehicle definition. I just disagree with letter B being included, which is that any vehicle which, by reason of the attachment of advertising or commercial messages and/or storage of service equipment or other commercial merchandise or hardware, presents the outward appearance of a vehicle that is utilized primarily in the furtherance of commercial or industrial enterprise. I think that's pretty broad, and I think people use their vehicles in a variety of ways. I have a pickup truck. We have a rack on top so that the one time a year we go and get 8-foot sheets of plywood, we can put it up there. The 90% of the time that it's driven when my husband's commuting or I'm, driving the kids,
You don't put a wrap on it.
I think that one of the things.
But that's not what this is. This isn't just saying a wrap. And also, I think the wraps are something that, is popular right now because it's become affordable. People do it right now. If you have a home-based business, you might have a wrap on your vehicle. I think this was intended to try and prevent having fleets of, a service organization. All right, Chief, you were not at our last conversation, so if you could weigh in.
It's I tend to just filter this information through to Maddie so she can sort of handle the business. But it's been our experience that much like any of the other businesses we have in town, people are working from their house. So in terms of contractors, tradespeople, taxis, all of these businesses, most of them don't have base stations, most of them don't have office space, most of them don't have yards anymore. So the majority of people that we have at least coming in and complaining about getting tickets for commercial vehicles in municipal lots are people who have work trucks. There are people in town that have cars with wraps on them. Some of them are questionable as to whether or not they're properly registered because of the way they're used. But in general, a lot of the village has off-street parking, and we don't really give those folks a hard time because they're parking in their driveways. But I can tell you that there is a fairly drastic need for those that aren't maintaining rented construction space or otherwise to keep their vehicles. There are places around town that are renting space to them, and we've had discussions with folks when they're looking for a place to go. We don't recommend any place in particular, but that's typically what businesses are doing. My feeling is that, and this is just based on my experience, and I'd worked midnights for a lot of years, if we open up our lots to commercial vehicles, even including those with wraps, we're going to become storage space for businesses in our municipal lots. And quite frankly, we don't really have enough space for the residential, for the passenger vehicles that we have right now. I don't know that we have the space to get into the business of being business parking.
I think there's also an ability, you always have a measure of discretion. So if you have a pickup truck that meets the criteria for a non-commercial pickup truck, and that's your car, and one time or infrequently you have material there, I don't even think that's necessarily an issue if that's your residential car. I think that when it becomes enforceable is when it becomes very obvious that that is being used solely, like predominantly for commercial purposes. And I think that, again, here perfection may be the enemy of the good, because I don't know that we're going to get, we always have the opportunity to deal with things once we've set down parameters, to look at things through a different lens if it comes up as an issue. But I think the lion's share of the issues that we have is that people who legitimately need the spots, because they don't have, they live there nearby and they don't have a place to park, far outweigh the number of those people who may be driving a commercial vehicle and that's all they're driving. So I think, again, there are ways we can look at that, but I think that we continue to perpetuate the problem we're trying to solve if we don't put down some firm parameters, because we can always then determine too, and like everything else malleable, if it turns out to be a huge problem, we can also retool. Right now, I don't know that we have a hand on how many people, that this would apply to. So I think there's ways to self, to correct, course correct, but I think also making sure that, having a business requires overhead expense, and that's different than people who have to drive their car and live in a place.
I'd say something to consider is that you take a look at some of our religious facilities around here that have parking lots and what those look like at night in terms of spaces. I don't know what arrangements are made and whether it's agreements with the churches, but if you look at their parking lots and we open it up to allowing those vehicles to then park in municipal lots, I suspect that municipal permits are probably cheaper than whatever financial arrangement people may have in other places. So we'd likely be displacing a great deal of those vehicles to our municipal lots.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because if a church is not paying tax dollars, they should not be collecting money for profit, so they should not be renting their space, I don't believe.
Like I said, I'm not aware of anybody's financial arrangements, whether they have them or not. I simply know that I've driven by parking lots and
Oh
seen
yeah, I know.
great
If,
number
we,
of
if
commercial
I'm just saying, if we
vehicles
want to get everybody into compliance, the churches are probably not in compliance financially if they're collecting money for allowing their parking lots to be used for profit. But that's another topic.
Yes.
Trustee Casada, you were the one who mentioned wraps to me the first time.
Yes. And I think that's a conversation that Chief and I had several months back in regards to that, and the consistency of commercial vehicles obtaining overnight 24 hours overnight daytime parking. I'm glad to see that that's soon. The wraps to me is like, it's a difficult situation, and not sure if we're going to be able to solve that issue. Again, it's a residential, is a literally just a regular standard plate on it, wrap, advertising the business. I think that's the tricky part for me. I am in favor of going the municipal parking lots overnight. I think that part of what our process is, and that's what I asked last time. When someone goes in front of the planning board, asks for waiver of parking when they have a residential need, where do they park? Parking. Do that is because parking lots next to it. So I'm okay with that, putting those caveats from 8 o'clock to 8 a.m. See how that works. Go from there. And at the end of the day, this is to be something temporary, because at some point of time, those lots will be developed. So that, again, that becomes a total different conversation.
Right, that's just lots
Okay.
5 and 6.
But that's part of Market Square.
Right, no, but
Total-
the only thing that was relevant to Market Square was the time that was changing. This
Yes,
is relevant to all the municipal tag lots.
Yeah. Oh, okay. For the other one, you're talking about the time?
No, the only time question was with
For that
post
one,
office
yes.
and Market.
That's what I
But
said.
with
for
the
time.
commercial vehicle
Yes.
stuff, yeah.
For the
okay.
commercial, yeah.
I assume that when people apply, this information, this definition of what vehicles are eligible for a municipal tag would be clear to them.
What we're looking forward to doing is actually, once we get the tags out, it won't be like a paper one like we have now with stickers on it. We'll actually get like an actual tag, like the train tag ones, and we will start applying a license plate to the tag, because
Right.
some of the problems that have arisen is that people are sharing the tags.
Right.
So we're going to start associating it. So one idea that was brought up is actually having people bring in their registrations, and right there we're going to be able to see is it a passenger car, is it a commercial car, and then we'll start being able to keep track of it a little bit better.
Well, except that if all we were doing was following what the DMV identifies it as, then letter B is irrelevant. Because we're trying to broaden the definition of commercial vehicles with letter B here, beyond what the DMV recognizes.
I think that if the definition is going to be expanded as the board had requested, so not just by DMV classification, but in addition, there were a couple other
I
conditions,
think actually
right?
staff requested that. Well, some board. All right.
Well, we're talking about also pickup trucks, and I think that's part of the problem that became from, that was brought up from another member of us in regards to pickups.
Yes, there were a
Always
couple.
additional pickup
We were actually
trucks,
looking
so-
to narrow it. This broadening, I think, was coming from staff.
There were a couple different iterations as we went through, but in any event, I think that what is not posted now and what could be helpful is the definition, whatever the board decides, in sort of one of your laminated files that you have at the desk in the clerk's office. So it's explained to folks. I mean, obviously people can, explain their situation differently than actually is true. But if they're, at least instructed, here are the things that are not going to be allowed. And so by virtue of the fact that you're paying us for this permit, you're agreeing to the fact that your vehicle doesn't fall into this classification. At least that would be a step in the right direction. I think.
Right, and if it does, then they're going to get a ticket.
Right.
Even if we would have given them a tag in error. But we don't want to put ourselves in the position of giving somebody a tag when they're not eligible for it.
Yes.
That's why the communication is essential at the time of application, right? So do they sign something when they apply, acknowledging that they are in compliance with this definition?
Currently, at the moment, no. You just come in and you can purchase a tag, which is why
Yeah.
we're trying to get it a little bit more organized.
Right. Everything else makes a lot of sense. I don't think anything else changed. The day, night, 24-hour thing. Anybody else have questions?
No, I think we had a lot of conversation on this, and I think one of the problems is that if you don't define it correctly up front, and you don't do it correctly up front, then we're going to have a lot of complaints. And then people don't get tickets, even though they're supposed to get tickets, and we start having a whole bunch of scenarios. And after all that conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a step one, is to take what we currently do, make it better, and the big piece of this is the tags themselves and what they look like. And secondly, I remember, because there was a lot of conversation back and forth. I mean, good conversation. Parking's like a big deal here. The timing, which was added, and the piece is that people either have to sign something and have to understand that what they're saying is the truth, right? So it's easy to look at a commercial plate. The other stuff becomes the issue. So that needs to get passed to the clerk's office. That would be right here. That people have to sign something to say, because if people lie, they're lying, get a ticket at some point. That's the best we can do for now. When we review what you're all working on, the next phase, looking at the whole parking, go different metering. The reality is, every time we hear this is temporary, it's malleable, there's discretion. Number one, discretion is a bad thing. Laws are exactly there to avoid discretion, not to increase discretion, because then you're treating people differently based on whatever. And every year that could change. You try to narrow that, not expand it. So I think we're just saying, like look through this process. I'm all for what you're doing. What we have now is not a good, is not going the way it should be. I see this as step one. Step two, I think you guys are already working on. But understand that every time we hear temporary, somehow years later, we're still discussing how this was a temporary scenario. So it would be good to see a nice plan, but I'm confident because I think you stated in the work session, you're already looking at the next step. That's, the camera is not pointing to you, Maddie, but I know that you're both going like that for the record. So I'm really excited because you're doing the plan. This is not just the end of something. I'm actually fine with it, but I do think the clerk's office needs to do a better job of making sure people sign something, say something. They're lying, but at least cover the village for saying that how they're using their vehicle.
So we currently have in place something like that for the train tag people. When they sign up every year for the train tag renewals, we actually have them sign a paper explaining, you know, this will may happen, etc. So, I mean, if you guys would like us, then I would speak with that with Sue and Maddie and see what we could do going forward. Because currently, right now, we've been telling people, you know, this is going to work up until January, up until December 31st. So going forward, or if you would like us to start, we can start doing that now.
That's a thought.
Yeah.
So Chief, I'm glad you're here this week because when we had this conversation about the commercial vehicle definition, we weren't really sure what problem we were solving for because you weren't there and Sue wasn't there. So our speculation was that we were solving for a fleet of vehicles. Well, you mentioned taxis, that could be a fleet of vehicles. So you feel that the definition as proposed here addresses, actually solves a problem that does exist.
Yeah, most people with fleets, in my experience, are places with a place of business. Ossining is chock full of people that have one truck or two trucks, and that's really what we'd be seeing.
And then plate readers, would this be tied in? Would we be able to? Would somebody be able to just drive right through?
License plate readers are really the last step of this whole thing. I mean, legislation has to be done right. The software that comes with it has to be there, and then the license plate reader really works with just about every vendor that's out there now. It's a matter of getting this all plugged in, and then yes, we should be able to do that.
Okay, so we're thinking this is like a January 2021 implementation. We're gonna be. Did we have a date?
We have
Okay.
equipment. But there's a software component of it. So the license plate reader is just a camera. It's the permitting software that the village gets into that's going to allow the plate readers to do their job.
No, I mean so the permitting. What's your anticipated date or your wish date if we move forward tonight?
So we have started speaking with a couple different companies about that. I was joined by Jamie, I was joined by the chief and village clerk, Sue Donnelly, the other day to review the first parking meter system. And we're just sort of trying to wrap our arms around all the
Oh no, I don't mean parking meters. I mean the tag lots.
It's all interrelated.
It's all one big puzzle with different pieces, which is why I say this is like step one of step A of like a giant pyramid of things. And it's difficult because you touch one thing over here and it creates an unintended consequence on the other side. So, you know, it's all one holistic
So what you're saying is the municipal tags could go through in a matter of a couple months.
We think this is
but
the
they're just going
low-hanging
to be
fruit.
reviewed
They
in a
would
manual
be
way for
enforced
now.
the same way they're enforced right now. In
Right.
order for us to do electronic enforcement of everything, that relies on the software on the back end, which would be tied to the metering program.
Which is not happening in a couple months. We're won't be up and running in a couple months.
By the end of the year, I would hope.
But it
Pretty
doesn't
ribbon cutting?
stop.
Ribbon cutting? Do I get to do one more?
Individual small for each meter,
Tiny little
individual
ribbon
ribbon
cutting.
cuttings all around.
Well,
yeah.
Maddie, this piece, step A, as I'm now lovingly referring to it, I thought you said in the work session April 1 or so, or in April, no?
For the municipal,
This thing, step
yes,
A.
yes. For step A, what we're looking at is hopefully, and Stuart, please correct me if I'm wrong. We're hoping to open the public hearing later in the month of March and have these changes. So again, these discrete changes having to do with what the tags look like, who's producing them, day, night, some of the verbiage, as well as the changes for municipal lots 1, 5, and 6, which have been clarified tonight, and the change in definition for commercial vehicles. All of that to be effective on April 1st. And then we're going to finish out the year, unless there are any other changes to municipal lots that come out, you know, that fall out during the parking feasibility study and whatnot. And so that's just the first step of this process to clean up what we have existing now before we start embarking on the larger process.
I'm just looking at a calendar. We can't call for a public hearing yet, right? Because we don't have the local. Can we?
You prepared.
Oh, so we could call for a public hearing tonight,
Right.
so the public hearing would be on the 18th, and then we could vote on April 1st.
Yeah.
That would be correct.
And people can show up on April 2nd and apply, or probably not quite yet, right? You have
It
to like
will take
order some
approximately
tags and
2
such.
weeks after that to be official with the State Department of State.
Till end of
Okay.
April.
Okay.
By end of April. That's, yeah.
So if I understand from the board, from the consensus of the board, you would want that lots 5 and 6 would also be an 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. parking for overnight. So that's the only change from the proposal. So that's fine. We can do that. And as I said, in anticipation that we may be able to do that, I did prepare a resolution, Martha, if you want. This is to call for a public hearing on local law 1, and that would be on the 18th of March.
So the first law we'll be voting on so far this year. I feel like we've been so darn busy, but we haven't gotten to this point yet, I guess.
So
Now they're gonna come fast and furious.
Actually, yes.
Okay.
Sort of.
Call for public hearing, proposed local law 1 of 2020 titled A Local Law Amending Chapter 250 Vehicles and Traffic of the Village of Austining Code. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining hereby calls for a public hearing to take place on March 18th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. at the Birdsall and Fagan Police Cut Facility 86-88 Spring Street, Austining, New York, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard to consider proposed local law 1 2020 titled A Local Law Amending Chapter 250 Vehicles and Traffic of the Village of Austining Code. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
So we look forward to hosting the public hearing right here in this very room 2 weeks from tonight, which will be March 18th. Thank you very much. And Stuart, with the local law 1, proposed local law 1 for 2020, that will be up on the village website sometime in the next, I guess I should actually be looking at Jamie.
conceivably tomorrow.
Okay.
It's a minor change, so it'll be.
Okay, great. Okay, good. So that people
So
can,
it'll be appropriately published and
yeah, people can spend 2 weeks reading through this really in-depth law. Thank you. Our update to the code. Alrighty. Next up, busy night, new business.
Okay, new business. Topic is proposed proposed local law 2 2020 transferring responsibility for dog licensing to the town of Austining.
Thank you, Martha. Good evening again, Mayor and members of the board. If the board will recall, in November, a resolution was approved by the board transferring the dog licensing to the town. And one of the provisions in that resolution was that the village would subsequently approve legislation which would remove the dog licensing from the village code. That is what proposed local law 2 of 2020 does. Basically makes it clear that it is now a town function, and anything that dealt with dog licensing is in fact deleted from the legislation. So it simply cleans that up, takes that out, and as I said, it is now and has been a town function. So that's local law 2, and that would also be calling for a public hearing pursuant to the resolution that Martha will read in a moment, also on March the 18th.
Go ahead. Well, we're going to comment on it. Well, the resolution that we'd be commenting on is calling for the public hearing. So before we do that, do people want to sort of recap on where we are? And I don't know, Trustee Lopez, if you've ever gotten the opportunity to participate in any of these conversations, you may have observed them.
I have not. I have observed them, and I have a dog. There you go.
So, just to clarify for folks, this is not suggesting that dog licenses are no longer required in the village of Austining. They are required for dog owners in the village and the town of Austining, but by taking it out of our local code, then it just reverts to the next higher level of government, which is town government. So the town clerk will issue them in her capacity as town clerk, and the fees will be established by the town board. Currently, until we pass this, there's still fees on the record for village if you have a dog license. And in fact, there was some inconsistency in recent years when the town had been collecting the town fees, even if you lived in the village, not realizing that the village maintained its own set of fees. And I bring this up now because if, sir, have a license for your dog and you live in the village of Austining, you were overcharged about $5 every year for the last 2.5 years, I believe, you are entitled to a credit. So when you go for your next license, it's going to be like $5, $10, or $15 cheaper. I think the whole thing is like $18 or $23 or something. It's not
It's
wild.
yeah, it's $15 if your dog is spayed or neutered, and 23 if it's not.
In the town.
Yes.
Okay. So it's going to be like it's going to be like free for you next year.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
very
You're
exciting.
getting a rebate.
As long as you are going for a new dog license, you'll get it as a discount going forward. If for some sad reason you do not have a dog and you overpaid in years past, you are welcome to go to the clerk's office and they will look up any overcharge that you had as a village resident and you will be refunded that amount.
So we have issued a lot of credits and a lot of refunds. So if anybody has like any questions
Have you
about
really?
it, they can yeah,
Wow.
like almost like
Does that mean people are like either reading emails or watching meetings?
so
Mayor's
what it
very
has
excited.
yeah.
We're not just
So
talking to each
Jamie,
other. That's so
Jamie
nice.
has sent out letters in early December, I believe, and people have been, come trickling in, and they've been saying whether they want a credit or they want a refund. A majority of people are just taking a credit. Some of the couple people wanted refunds, and we were waiting for a couple to come in, and we started slowly issuing the refunds, so it's working out.
Oh,
It's
I'm so
working out
glad to hear
okay.
that.
Yeah. So
there is an active dog owner online community. So that's where the word
Are
can
they by
spread.
dog type or just a general generic dog?
yeah.
Well,
so
no, well, it actually tends to be around the dog park.
Yeah.
That's what tends
That
to.
we know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
in
Which is
regards-
actually related to this whole
Yes.
conversation
Yeah.
as well. Yes.
Right.
in regard to the dog park, we officially got the dog tag park tags for the town. So if anybody has like a village dog tag and they're renewing, we're just gonna start issuing them to people. So you can come pick up your dog tags now for the park too.
Excellent. That just comes with your
Yeah, that comes
dog
with the
licensing
licensing. So if anybody that renewed in January and February, we were just waiting back to get confirmation on the tags. So I specifically today I mailed them out. So all those people are going to get in going forward. If you're going to come in to renew either online or anything, we'll be able to issue them to you.
Excellent. Thank you. This is all good news. Okay. So are we ready to hear the resolution calling for a public hearing? Madam Clerk.
Okay. Call for public hearing, proposed local law 2, 2020, titled A Local Law Amending Chapter 75, Article 2, Dog Control of the Village of Austin Code. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin hereby calls for a public hearing to take place on March 18, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. at the Bertolf Hagen Police Court Facility, 86-88 Spring Street, Austin, New York, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard, to consider proposed local law 2, 2020, titled A Local Law Amending Chapter 75, Article 2, Dog Control of the Village of Austin Code. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, authorization of small claim assessment review payments for 2019 assessment year. Whereas certain small claim assessment review (SCAR) proceedings were commenced in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of Westchester, against the Town of Austin by the following property owners for the 2019 assessment years. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin, upon certification by the Village Treasurer that all of the aforesaid taxes have been paid, hereby authorizes and directs the Village Treasurer to make such refund of real property taxes to the petitioners listed above, and be it further resolved that the Village Treasurer is authorized to make the aforesaid payments so that the Village may avoid the payment of any penalties, and be it further resolved that a notation shall be made in the margin of the assessment roll that the said assessments were reduced and that payment of refunds for the overpayment of real property taxes were made pursuant to this stipulation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So I will just say we had a more lengthy discussion about certiaries at a recent meeting. This is the private homeowner version of certiaries, which is why it's more palatable dollar amount for us to be considering. But I believe this is a notably shorter list than we may have seen in years past. Seem that way to you? It's only 8 houses,
Mhm.
only 8 properties. I feel like there's been longer lists in the past. Oh, I believe the treasurer was leaning forward. Tom, did you want to comment on that? Sorry.
I'm sorry. We group these together, so when they come in, we just.
Oh, so there may be more coming.
Right, because these were not all these, I think of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, of the 8 stipulations that are here, 7 or 8 were with the same tax assessment firm. So they, everything, so it could well be others that may come down the pike that It just depends when they get signed by the court.
But this could happen again in the not too distant.
Good.
All right. Madam Clerk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Visitor recognition. Is there anyone here who would like to address the board on any issue?
I think the two people sitting in our audience probably want to get the heck out of here. That answered more than enough questions this evening.
Okay, in that regard, then can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Or
To executive session for matters of real property and litigation.
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And with that, we say thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week at the Village Board Work Session at Village Hall. This meeting is adjourned to executive session.